Hello, my name is Mason Reed, and today I'm going to talk about sleep deprivation and sleep disorders as a public health problem. So, the public health problem that it is, sleep deprivation, sleep disorders, 1/3 of Americans say that they get less sleep than the recommended amount, and that recommended amount being at least 7 hours of sleep per night. So not enough sleep can actually result in the development of depression, obesity, type 2 diabetes, and even heart disease. Sleep disorders can often go undiagnosed and untreated and can lead to chronic diseases. Some of these common sleep disorders that we see are insomnia, sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, and narcolepsy. So let's make sleep a priority and avoid all of this. Let's educate and motivate others to pay attention to how much sleep they're getting. People need to know that sleep disorders can be diagnosed and treated. That's something that we see a lot in today's society, is that they just go undiagnosed and people don't know that they are treatable. And so healthy sleep makes for a healthy life. Here are some of the facts. We're going to go through some of this data rather quickly, but the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommend that adults receive at least 7 hours of sleep per night. The statistics below represent those who report receiving less than that 7 hours per night. So as you can see here, all adults, it says that 35% of all adults say that they don't get enough sleep per night. And among men and women, men tend to get a little less sleep than women at the 35% rather than the 34%. So based on age range, here you have a look at those that aren't getting enough sleep. So right here at the 45 to 54 age range, we see 39%. And so as we look at that, we see midlife crisis perhaps. And that's actually that stands out to me because at that age, I'm sure many chronic illnesses and diseases is when that gets diagnosed to people the most. Less than 7 hours among different races and ethnicities. Here we see that close to the bottom, Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders at 46.3% as the highest among the various races. And then Black at 45% is a close second place, and other multiracial following that. So smartphones, what kind of influence has smartphones and technology had on the impact that it's had on this lack of sleep? So the National Sleep Foundation found that 90% of people in the United States admit to using a technological device during the hour before turning in to sleep. And children often use electronic media to help them relax at night. Using electronic devices before bedtime can be physiologically and psychologically stimulating in ways that can adversely affect your sleep. So I'm sure many of us have experienced this or know of someone that has experienced this before, and the impact that it can have on a person's sleep when they are using smartphones before they go to bed. Jean M. Twenge of San Diego State University performed a study and she compared adolescents from 2009 to 2015, and they were 16 to 17% more likely to report sleeping less than 7 hours a night on most nights. And so she accredits a lot of this to the increased media screen time. Electronic device use, social media, and reading news online has increased over this time period, and so she associates that with the increased odds of short sleep deprivation. And I completely agree with this. I think that it has to be somewhat of a factor, and if not a major factor, in the declining rate of sleep hours. So sleep disorders, let's go through some of the more common ones. Insomnia is the most common sleep disorder, but despite advances in diagnosis and management, it often goes unrecognized and untreated. And left untreated, insomnia increases the risk of developing other illnesses, including depression, diabetes, hypertension, and possibly even death in other adults. Sleep apnea is another common medical condition that occurs in a large percentage of the population. It is when breathing repeatedly stops and starts during sleep. There's a doctor from East Tennessee State University that performed a study, and she found that sleep apnea may be a risk factor for the development of cardiovascular disease or heart disease. Sleep apnea may be implicated in stroke and transient ischemic attacks. Sleep apnea is also associated with coronary heart disease, heart failure, and cardiac arrhythmias, and pulmonary hypertension may be associated with sleep apnea, especially in patients with pre-existing pulmonary disease. So as we can see, that's two big sleeping disorders: is one, sleep apnea, and also insomnia, that can lead to even greater chronic illnesses in the future. And so what are the risks that we are taking when we choose to not get enough sleep or sleep deprivation? So it's in fact, the risk is the scary, dangerous thing is that people are failing to recognize that there is even an issue. People might believe that they're receiving a sufficient amount of sleep just because their body has adapted to getting less, but your body may not be telling you now that you need more sleep, but down the road this could lead to other serious issues. So here we have kind of the meat of the argument, or these health risks that we find are associated with a lack of sleep. This table represents a comparison between those that get a sufficient amount of sleep and those that do not, and the health risks associated. So let's look at these two columns. We see those that get less than 7 hours of sleep have a 33 compared to 26% risk of being obese. And so the physically inactive is a 7% increase. The current smoker is a 8% increase, and excessive alcohol is a 0.3% increase. So in each category, you are more likely to develop these health risk factors than if you are receiving a sufficient amount of sleep. A bigger part of the argument here is that all of this leads to these chronic conditions. So as you can see, heart attack, heart disease, stroke, asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, cancer, arthritis, depression, chronic kidney disease, and diabetes. Each of these categories has, in the short sleep column, we see is a greater percentage than the sufficient sleep column. So that being said, it is clear that if you get less sleep than the sufficient amount, you are more at risk to develop these chronic conditions. So personally, I am passionate about this particular public health issue because I know the pros and the cons. I am a typical college student, and I understand that I've gone through phases of my life where I've not got the sufficient amount of sleep that I need, and I've noticed the difference in my health and in my brain power throughout the day. But for 2 years of my life, actually, I was on a solid sleep schedule. I did a service mission for my church, and so we were mandatory 8 hours every night. We'd go to bed at 10:30, wake up at 6:30. And during this mission, I didn't have any electronic devices, so I didn't have that to distract me before bed. And so this inspires me to make a plan to improve sleep quality and make sleep a priority in public health. So I have some ideas. My potential solutions is, one, to create a social media nationwide challenge called Sleep Better, Live Better. And we invite famous influencers to get involved, and the idea would be to block out 8 hours a night and whatever fits your schedule to force yourself to go to bed and wake up at those specific times. The key is to leave out your technological distractions and rely on an old school alarm clock, and it'd be a 2-week trial for people to become aware of the change in their lives. And so I think that this is a good idea because social media is so big in today's society, and it can really help and ignite a good cause. And so another potential solution is regular government-funded seminars, and I believe that if adults are regularly educated about this, that they'll continue to pass this on to their children, and they'll be made aware of the potential risks in developing these chronic illnesses can have. We have enough time and money, or if we invested this time and money, we could really make a difference. So the conclusion is we should not turn our heads away from this issue. Sleep is a necessity of life, and people need not go without a sufficient amount of sleep. Sleep is one that people have entire control over, and it's a shame to see that these chronic illnesses are being developed because of a lack of sleep. So let's make sleep a priority in our lives.